Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Rabbil Alameen. Akibatun lil Mustaqim. Wala wuhwana wala ala dalimeen. Muhammadan, who is Sayyidina Makbubana in the Kana Sayyidin Mursaleen, Salawatu, Allah Ta'ala wa Salamuhu alayhi. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh lil ikhwani khwati fi din. Wassalamu ala mani taba huda lil ikhwani khwati fi Africa, Europa, America, Caribbean wa kulli makan. Halin wa salim bikum. Anjurama to my full-bait community. And I know we have the last week so of course the non-Islamic traditions, and so I had to remain quiet because people live in the West and so forth, and they have to entertain guests and so forth, so it's a good thing. But in this time since these particular holidays has occurred, non-Islamic holidays, there's been a lot of activity, of course, as you know, on the continent. And in Morocco, where I'm living, where everywhere has been a lot of activity. And so I wanted to talk to you today again because everyone's aware of what has happened in Nigeria, where we had our Fulani brothers who went and in a reprisal raid killed upwards of 200 Christians in certain areas of northern Nigeria. We know that. And there's been a lot of speculation and a lot, again, written about this situation. And of course, they got this situation wrong, as they always have. And so I said to myself, it's time to talk about these groups, because I want to make sure that those who are Fula, whether they're in Morocco, or they're in Senegal, or Mauritania, or Guinea Conakry, Ghana, Nigeria, wherever they may be, I want to make sure that we understand what are we looking at. Because according to the press and many African pundits who write, as though the Fulani people are one people and they have one idea and everybody is the same. And it's not a fair assessment, as we know. And I want to make sure that we have a clear understanding about what is happening there in the Sahel, who is involved, who is doing what, and how we make the distinction between them. And as you saw my marquee for this program, where are we at here now? Okay. Here, brothers and sisters, is very interesting. Between years of 2014 and to about 2018, this terror designation, a global terror designation, they went around to many spots and they declared certain groups to be what we say, vicious groups. A lot of these groups, I don't call them terrorists, because that's the definition a lot of times that the Tubac governments give, and their apparatus like the UN and others. I don't like to call them particularly that. They're wayward, they're criminal. Yes, we agree to that. But I'm not going to designate other people who we know are Muslims to be that. And a situation like this, the last couple of weeks, and you've been hearing me on these programs talking about how if you read, it's tiresome when you read these comments by many news agencies. And again, remember, you see, they always had the ISIS, remember, and here, they don't show the AQ, the Al-Qaeda, they don't show them here in this situation. But at this time, for a stretch of years, Boko Haram was rated as the deadliest, quote unquote, terrorist group on earth. And then ISIS, and then here it's funny, the Taliban. Now, here's why I said to you why terrorism has to be redefined. You heard me say this many times. The Taliban was running Afghanistan, right? So they were attacked and they were displaced. This is their homeland. They fought back And we know it took 20 years. They finally got their government back and whatnot. But in this time, they call them terrorists. Now, how you can be a terrorist when you're defending your homeland against invaders? But this is what we're talking about. But then fourth is the one that's very interesting here. Fulani militia. And from a stretch of period of time, they said they were the fourth deadliest, quote unquote, terror group in the world. And I think the definition we look at terror, we have to look at it in a different situation. Because in the case of the Taliban, they were attacked in their country and driven out of government, and they fought back to regain their country. Our brothers, the Fulani herdsmen, themselves were driven out many of their grazing lands. Their rights were taken, their cattle was taken, and they began to form militias. We all know this. And they begin to defend themselves, and they begin to go on attacks. So I don't really consider this to be that, because they were being killed and they're killing. So if you're going to label the Fulani herdsmen as terrorists, you have to label the Tiv, the Igbo, the Yoruba, and these other groups, the Dogon, and so many other ethnic groups through the Sahel who are killing the Muslims, killing Fulani. They should be there should be also given a terror designation, which they have not. And so that's what I wanted to talk about in this situation. Many people say, well, it doesn't matter. It does matter, because when you are living in certain parts of the land, believe me, there was one brother, I forgot his name of his program. He said it good. He was talking about how what has happened to the Africans when they don't care about the other Africans, or they say, well, he's not my ethnic group. He's not over here. He's not over there. I don't care. But in a blanket thing, he was talking about how the Americans now are limiting the visas for everybody. Whether you Fulani, if you're Tiv or Yoruba or Igbo or Dogon or Hausa, whatever ethnic group it is, they are limiting the amount of visas to enter into the United States. See, so it does matter. This other here, as you see here, which again, brothers and sisters, this is why it's so confusing. This is a later depiction from another global terrorist, global think tank, talk about quote unquote terrorism, especially in the Sahel. If you notice there, you do not see the Fulani herdsmen. But again, if you look at all of the pundits that say, right, have they always lumped us with all of these groups here? Except Boko Haram. We know that's not them. They don't look, the Fulani herdsmen has not been labeled as Boko Haram, but they have been labeled Islamic State and others. You see how confusing these terror designations are. So I wanted to get into that and talk about that, and to give an education about our people and about who is doing what and why they're doing it, and make a distinction, because it's not fair when you look at it from a standpoint of saying that all Black people in the United States are the same. They vote the same, they eat all the same food, they have the same loves, and they have the same hates. We know that's not true. We know the two-body American, they don't all eat the same food. They don't all have the same views. They don't have they don't love the same things. But when it gets down to particular groups, they seem to lump us all together as one, as though we have one person, and then one person thinks one way and everybody else follows. That's not the case. And that's why we have to talk about that. Now, I want to get into something else too before we get further into this, brothers and sisters, to show you the complication and why the education about the Sahel and other parts of Africa, North Africa in particular, and then the Sahel region, why it's complicated. It's not a black-white issue. Here you have a brother who looks Fulani. Okay, you put him in northern Nigeria. You put him in the Gambia, or you put him in northern Ghana, or you put him in Mauritania. He's Tuareg. See, you see what I mean? This is why this is the issue about the groups, ethnic groups. This is why this is not a white and black thing. This is a brown and brown thing, black and black. This is what it's Africans. And it's why it's complicated. You look at these sisters here. They're not Fulani, but they look Fulani. They're Tuareg. And many of our brothers marry these girls. And so I want to make that point to get to push it into the minds that, especially those who live outside of of Africa and don't understand the Sahel per se, and they think it's a black-white issue. It is not. And why the Fulani men marry girls like this, because they look just like Fulani women, but they're Tuareg. They're not Tubab. See, so this is something, brothers, to get you educated, especially those who do not quite understand the dynamics there in the Sahel, because these young beautiful sisters here are Tuareg. And our Fulani brothers have married these girls for centuries. And the difference is, as you heard me talk about in previous cases, the Fulani factor disappear, even though we marry another girl that looks Fulani, but she's Tuareg. But when she raises that Tuareg Fulani child, the child loses the Fulfulde language and begin to adopt the Amazigh and Arabic instead. This is how we, as you heard me talk many times, how we have disappeared in North Africa. See, so I just wanted to give you those points, because when we talk about Tuareg or fighting the Fulani, people make it, they'll show some Tuareg person who's very light-skinned, which is not the norm, because the norm for the Tuareg are ranging from light brown to black. As you saw last week when that mayor of that one city there in Niger, he's black, he's 3 times darker than I am. So I wanted to get that point across, again, brothers and sisters, so we can get that understanding and to understand that this is not a black-white thing. This Tuareg brother here, who dwells in the Sahara, he has married Fulani women. And some of those women, who the father, him, would be Tuareg, but the mother is a Fula woman. But she raises the child as Fulani. And the child speaks a Fulfulde language. But some of the children begin to learn the Amazigh language, and they move up to Northern Africa, and they suddenly now become Amazigh. They're not called Fulani anymore, especially if you look in southern part of Morocco, where I live. You see brothers there all the time. You know they're Fulani. And many of them say they are Fulani, but they don't speak the dialect anymore because their daddy was Tuareg and their mother was Fulani, or their father was Fulani and the mother was Tuareg. So they learned the Amazigh language. They did not speak Pular. See, so these are the issues that I wanted to get in your mind. So when we talk about these cases that's going on in the Sahel, when someone attacks somebody, don't think of it as a black-white issue. Tubab going after black folk. That's not the case. This brother is Tuareg. He may be fighting with his brother who's Fulani, but there's no difference. Look at him. He looks Fulani, but he's Tuareg. See, that's why I said we have to be very careful when we do it. Now, these are the Mujahideen people that are with the Tuareg groups. Again, you see them to be brown-skinned. This is why, again, brothers and sisters, a lot of times you cannot see the people when you see them, you don't know who is what. And then when they speak, you have to understand what they're speaking. If it's Amazigh, or if they're speaking the Arabic language, or they're speaking some Fulfulde dialect. But any of these brothers here could pass for Fulani themselves. But again, they're Tuareg. And this is why, again, you have to have a playbook to understand the Sahel and North Africa too, but especially in the Sahel where you have the mixing the cultures, as you heard me talk about many times, because this is a very, very complicated issue. We got one comment here. Son of Adam, how you doing, my dear brother? Thanks for showing up today. I really appreciate it. Thank you, my dear brother. So now we have that backdrop. These are the militias, brothers and sisters, that are attacking the Fulani community, especially in Nigeria in particular. But these are type of people that you will find who are everywhere in Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. And they have been armed, they've been funded, and they get their pay from nefarious sources, which has to be a Tubab apparatus that is arming these people. Because these people who generally, if you saw them before they went to these type of groups, they were very, very poor. Now they're sporting weapons and stuff like that, cost 4 or 5, maybe 500, 600% times the money they earn in 1 year. And they're instrumental in fighting and killing Fulani, and the Fulani who are going in retaliation. So we'll get into this now. The Global Terror Index suggests that the Fulani herdsmen and the militias are one of the most dangerous groups in the world today. They still say the same thing, but they have not made the distinction between the Fulani herdsmen Mujahideen, the Fulani herdsmen who are bandits and brigands. They have not made that distinction. They have not made the distinction between the Fulani militias, who are only interested in guarding their pastures, their people, their families, their kinfolk, and their areas. They're not into trying to overthrow the government. They're not trying to go after other ethnic groups or anything like this. They have not made a distinction. I'm giving you distinctions today for your education, so you cannot label all of us, even though you Fulani, because many of the Fulani people themselves don't understand what's going on. And they themselves have made errors in designating you, me, as terrorists. And it's wrong, because we don't have the education. But the terror index suggests the Fulani herdsmen and militias are one of the most deadliest groups in the world today. By 2014, the Fulani herdsmen were up and running in a revenge mode. They never talk about why the Fulani have went into this revenge mode, because of the killings that has occurred. We've talked about this. I've given you proof from almost every place in the Sahel showing 300 killed, 200 killed, 50 here, 75, 500 killed over here. Fulani. And so when they took to the AK-47, then this situation here popped up where they began to go in jihad, and and groups got together and they began to maraud. There are stark differences between the Fulani herdsmen and terror groups and their attacks. Okay, there's differences. You take the AQ and you take the ISIS. Their attacks are different because they come in and they're trying to cause havoc, and they're trying to take over territories that are not theirs. But the Fulani herdsmen, this is our homeland. Our cattle and our forefathers have grazed in this homeland for centuries upon centuries. They've lived here and they died here. So when they have been attacked and driven from their homeland, they fight back. The ISIS in the AQ, this is not their homeland. So when they come to do something, it's not the same. The Fulani herdsmen, that's their homeland, and someone's drove them out. Okay, it's just like the Taliban. They were driven out, right? Out of government. See, and then they went back into the mountains and fought 20 years to regain their country back. It's the same thing to Fulani herdsmen in this regard. It's a difference between them and the AQ and the IS. So the Futafula or revenge attacks are graduate to offensive jihad. This is because as the Mujahideen, the herdsmen, begin to see the governments are not protecting them, the security forces are after them. The Tubab has invaded the land and given weapons to their arch enemies who have been enemies to them for centuries, giving them weapons so they can kill. The Tubab groups, as you heard me give proof on UN reports showing that Tuba, especially Russian and American, have been involved in a lot of murders, okay, of Fulani people. And we know from the Congress of US that they exposed that the underbelly of the coups going on in the Sahel and the West African area has been them. They've trained other Africans to overthrow. We know that. So we have the proof of that. So we have Fulani, Futafula, Mujahideen had graduated to offensive jihad. They said, look, we cannot survive unless we fight and band together to take control of an area and call it an emirate. That's how they look at it. I'll get into other distinctions here shortly, inshallah ta'ala. So again, the Fulani herdsmen groups are in reprisal mode. That's what you don't get from all the British, the BBC, and the United States think tanks and their news agencies, even African agencies who are non-Islamic. A lot of them don't give you they don't tell you that the TIV went in and slaughtered and hacked to death many Fulani people. They don't talk about the Yoruba doing this to the Fulani people. They don't talk about that. And the Fulani came back. They only talk about after the Fulani come to make jihad against them for what they have done. See, they don't give you that part of it. They only tell you the Fulani people done something, but they don't tell you why they went after these particular people. See, and this is the grave difference. Now these groups have become more vicious as these non-Islamic groups, the TIV, the Yoruba, the doggone, like in Mali, and some of these other ethnic groups have been very harsh and very vicious. As you heard me report, I gave you evidence of Fulani being put into mass graves, killed. Some were still living when they were buried alive. Others were burned. They get them and stab them and throw them into a fire. This is what they were doing to Fulani people. So the Fulani people in retaliation have been more vicious. They become as vicious as their attackers. So we have reprisals back and forth. And especially after the kinfolk have been killed, they went on a killing spree themselves. And this is what's not being talked about. It's not fair. No one is here defending the right of another person to kill someone. We have rules in Islam for this. We have rules. And any death, because when you kill one person, like killing the whole human race. When you wantonly murder somebody, okay, we have rules of that. And even in Polaco, in our code of conduct as Fulani people, we have these kind of conduct. Even though we have an enemy, we have to be forthright in that, in our attacks and so forth and so on. But I'll get more into this, but some of us are not abiding by that. The terror index has finally hit it right, got it right. As of 2/22, the Fulani herdsmen were no longer issued as a terror or as a real terror organization. Interesting, isn't it? Very interesting, isn't it? Because finally, somebody in that index has got it right. See, they got it right. And this is what makes it very interesting. Because finally someone start to do their research and say, you know what? These Fulani herdsmen have been going across the Sahel for centuries upon centuries. And suddenly someone took their cattle and they went to go get it and they fought people and they killed people to get their homeland back and get their cattle back and their way of life back. And I just got some, thank you, my dear brother, for your kind words. Assalamu alaikum, my dear brother King. How you doing, my dear brother? And our brother here said the Nigerian Yorubas are thinking about their kingdom and won't involve our Fulani Hausa brothers because we feel we've been invaded by them. Yes, brothers, you have it right. Yes, and we have a lot of grievances against one another. The Tiv, Yoruba, and the Igbo, they have a grievance against the Fulani because the Fulani has been vicious and they've had kingdoms that they were running, and they were vicious. We know that, and they maintained these kingdoms, and the Igbo, the Tiv, and so forth were under them as vessels. We know this, and will be valid if we do not what Uthman and Fodio did. And again, according to Islamic rules and law, I can't get into that right now because it's not Islamic station. I mean, I have an Islamic station, but what I mean by that is we're not going to get deep into the Sharia about why somebody is going on offensive jihad. I can only mention some of the peripheral things about what has happened to the Fulani people. This is more technical. I would have to get into it. Why did Usman and Fodio go on jihad? Why did some other famous other like Modit Debo Adama? Remember him? He was one of the others who founded one of the states. Of course, we know it's named after him in Nigeria. We know that. Okay, we know that. So why did they take the jihad? Those are very complicated Islamic issues. Just a side question, if you can answer privately. Okay. Okay. Yes, I will. Inshallah. I think if you have my email or ask me near the end of the program, inshallah, and I'll give you my email. As for anyone else, my brother here said this. Also, give time. Yes, references. Give time and when you reference. Okay, and offensive jihad. You put a question mark. Offensive jihad is when you have a emir or a sultan who gives an order that you can go to fight. And that means now you can go offensive jihad. There's other circumstances where you don't need that, but we won't get to that, like the things happening in Palestine, right? Palestine is not a sultanate, it's not an emirate either, you know what I mean? And they don't have a sultan, but they begin fatwas to fight back because they were under attack and they were trying to be exterminated. So they are all on offensive and defensive jihad. See, so there's a lot of complications there. Again, Islamic rules, about that. Okay, one more here. The same brother says, fight those who fight you. Yes, again, Surah 9, Surah Toba, Subhanahu wa ta'ala was very angry in this because of the treachery of the disbelievers against the Muslims. And yes, he was talking about the rules, and he has mentioned in other parts of the Quran the same thing: fight those who fight you, because we have rules. And if you saw some of my early classes, like especially last year, I talked about the classifications of disbelievers. 3 of them we don't fight, 1 of them we fight, and you heard me say this many times before. So you just can't go fight somebody just because he say, look, you know what, I'm Catholic, and you go fight him. No, it doesn't work like that. And I gave these conditions, and there's 3 of the groups you do not fight. The other group you do fight, like what's happening in Palestine today. And those who are backing them, those you fight because they are what they call harbi, because they kill Muslims. You fight them. You're authorized to fight them. But again, brothers and sisters, the Islamic part of it is I would have to go through the Sharia to explain a lot about this. But in a nutshell, you need authorization in order for you to take offensive jihad, like what's happened in Palestine. You're not a sultanate. You're not an emirate. But they had to fight offensively because of what has happened to them. See, and so they've received the fatwas from many religious bodies. So that's that. So let me get back to this part here. Okay. So anyway, we got to the point now where we understand the terror designations and whatnot. But here's the interesting part about this, brothers and sisters. Our African governments have never let that go. They went according to what the Americans and the European, the EU, and what the Americans have said, and what the UN has said, and their apparatus who designate terrorists. But our African leaders generally have never relinquished that. So even though these groups who rate terrorism have now thrown us out of this terror group designation, okay? We're no longer listed in that anymore. But our African heads of states in the Sahel in particular and in West Africa still label the herdsmen as that. Now, why is that? I'll get into that. Why is that? Why won't our African leaders stop to calling Fulani people terrorists? When the Global Terror Index, a apparatus, independent apparatus, well known in the world, the Americans use it, the Europeans use it, the Asians use it, suddenly they themselves have said the Fulani herdsmen are not classified in these type of groups anymore, like they were back in 2014 to about 2018. See? And where they labeled the Futafula community, the herdsmen, as terrorists. And again, if you look at this again, you see Boko Haram, you see IS. How many times we've seen articles where it said the Fulani herdsmen and militias are affiliates of ISIS? You know now it's a lie, because they are again lumping all of us together, because this global index said no, they're not. They're not affiliated with Boko Haram. They're not affiliated with ISIS, okay, in this regard. You see? So, and you see this designation here, which was 2022. Where's the Fulani herdsmen? They're not there. Because finally somebody got it right. Because the Fulani herdsmen and their groups are reprisal driven. Reprisal driven. The terror groups like ISIS and all them, they're not reprisal terror. They are wanting to go after, to create havoc, and to create a homeland of their own where they claim it for their own. Our brothers, the Fulani herdsmen, have been toiling this land for centuries upon centuries. Over 1,400 years they've been there. Well over 1,400 years. So this is their homeland. So they fight to maintain it. The Islamic State and so forth, and these other upstart terror, so quote unquote terror groups, which I don't like to use, are not 1,400 years old. You see, big difference, brother. I'm hoping that you understand this so I can get you to understand about your Fulani brothers. And our African states won't release us on that. Even though the UN, others said the Fulani herdsmen and their groups are not classified as terrorists, our African leaders still call me, you, and all of Fulani people terrorists, and the Tubab Americans still call all of us terrorists. When the global index said, no, they're not that anymore. They're reprisal groups, as you heard me say. Terror groups in the Sahel. Where is the Fulani herdsmen now? You don't see them, huh? They're not listed in there. They finally got it right. Okay, now. So now we understand that. Our African governments respectfully consider them and the Futafula militias as terrorists. Because there's, now you understand why, brothers and sisters. Why the Ghanaian president? Why the Togo president? Why some of the others in West Africa label them as that? Because there's money and Western power weaponry in continuation of calling them terrorists. Brothers and sisters, when these wayward African brothers who are running these countries call every Fulani a herdsman, every Fulani person a terrorist, money is poured into their hands and their cronies. Now you understand why they cannot release that, because they get money. When they get there and their government shows in Nigeria, Togo, Ghana, across the way, Mali, Burkina Faso, wherever they may be, when they get on television, government operated and controlled, and they get up to talking about the terrorists, the Fulani herdsmen terrorists, because the Americans and the others, British, and the many of the think tanks begin to pour money into those countries and give them weapons, and their pockets get fat with euros and American dollars, because they continue to call us that when the global terror index said we're not that anymore. But our leaders continue that because it's money driven, brothers and sisters. They know that the Fulani herdsmen are not terrorists, but they say that so they can get money from the West. Now you understand. They hold on to power and ability to quell insurrections. Also, when they get all this high-tech military madness, that gives them power to stay in power. And this is another reason why when they overinflate the threat from the Fulani herdsmen, they get money poured in, they get weapons poured in, and that way they'll stay in the power longer because they have the Tuba backing. Christian and other non-Muslim groups and their militias killing the Fulani kinfolk involved in continued mass murder reprisals aren't listed as terrorists. This is why I said, brother, you think about this. You have a group listed, and we have names for many of these militias, even in Nigeria. The ESN is one of them, who is funded, okay? Some say there's the Americans are behind the scenes funded, but some say the Nigerian government is funding them. But they're still a militia, and they kill Fulani. That's their whole apparatus, is to kill Fulani people, okay? Now, but they're not labeled as a terrorist group, even though they've been designated as the ESN, the Eastern Security Network. But they're not considered terrorists after they have slaughtered hundreds of Fulani people. Interesting, isn't it? Very interesting. So you see the void detection, prosecution, and likely be armed by security forces and Western powers. This is the other thing. You notice something. These groups who have attacked and caused the Fulani to go on reprisals are not prosecuted. That's funny, isn't it? They're not designated. And so therefore, this is the problem. The Fulani people and the herdsmen who are out there in the savannah region who are attacked and their kinfolk killed. They can't run to the police to tell the police because the police do nothing to protect them. And the police many times are involved in these militias, okay, to kill Fulani. So when the Fulani go there and complain, say, look, they just killed 10 of my people in my village in the savannah region, they don't do anything. So the Fulani take to the AK-47 when they get information that some Tiv over here had took 5,000 of the cattle. They go there and reprisal, and what do? They take care of business. Suddenly, we have the whole government apparatus after them, but not after the ESN when they killed a whole bunch of Fulani brothers and sisters. The Eastern Security Network, they're in Nigeria. I can talk about them. I'll talk about them because it's right on topic. And they're funded and they're protected. To the kudos to the president of Nigeria, because he's Fulani himself. He's never designated a herdsman or even a bandit as a terrorist, which is good because we have to be very careful when we label those people that. See, so this is some of the integral things that we have to look at. Now, there are stark differences between the Futafula Mujahideen, the marauding bandits, and defensive jihad-based Futafula militias. The only common ingredient that they have is they all are herdsmen or former herdsmen. This is a key, brothers and sisters. The Futafula Mujahideen are Fulani herdsmen, the Messina group, and some of the other militias under them, they're herdsmen. The marauding bandits were herdsmen, but they had their livelihood and their grasslands taken from them. But they are essentially, their main ingredient, they're herdsmen. The militias, the defensive jihad, meaning those we see in Nigeria, in Mali, and Burkina Faso, in Niger, where the Tuareg and the Afro-Arabs and some of the other ethnic groups attack the Futafula community, right? They form militias to protect the community. This is what we're talking about here, the defensive jihad, because they're not out, they have never sworn, hey, I'm going to go fight the government. I'm going to take over the government. I want to immigrate. They don't say that. All they want to do is protect their homeland, protect their family and kinfolk and their cattle. So they are militias because they had no choice. They put people out on the range with AK-47s to protect them from marauders coming into their areas to steal their cattle and kill their kinfolk. See, So we have those three groups, see? And so each group, the main ingredient is they are herdsmen. But you have some of Mujahideen, you have some who are marauding bandits and brigands, and then you have the militias. So I want that understood so you can understand what's going on with the Fulani people. Now I'm giving it to you, so now you can make a distinction. When you hear about what happened here last week, when they killed 200 Christians there in Nigeria, that was more or less the marauding bandits and brigands who did this. This was not the Mujahideen, see? Now, the bandits, and I really don't like to use that term either, but for this segment, I have to use it so we can understand. The bandits are formed due to cattle and wealth stolen from them. See, no one talks about that part either. Sheikh Gumi made some points there in Nigeria, the famous brother of Deluxe, scholar of Islam. He talked about this issue, that the bandits would not be bandits today if they didn't have their rights taken from them. When they had their cattle and wealth stolen from them, there was nobody there to protect them. No one, no police come to arrest the individual who stole their wealth and driven them off the land. They didn't do it. So suddenly these people began to take up arms and form groups, and they became quote unquote bandits as economic remedy to their grievances in order so they can put money in their pocket. They kidnap. And I'll get a little bit more as we go down there. I'll start to talk about them a little bit more. The Futafula militias generally are defensive oriented, as you heard me say, providing protection for a particular homeland. The Futafula militias are not terrorists, brothers and sisters. They're not Mujahideen per se either, because they stay in their area and they protect their homeland. They don't go out marauding. They don't go 50 kilometers, 60 kilometers out to maraud. They don't do that. They stay around in close-knit groups and they protect their own. See? The Futafula Mujahideen groups are offensive and defensive orientated because they have, again, these are those who are fighters. They tend to be strong Muslimin. They have people among them who are well versed in Quranic law and the Sunnah of the Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam. So they figure now, because they have enough members, like the Messina group, that they could form an emirate. And they're doing it out of defensive and offensive, because if they don't defend themselves, they'll be killed off. So they take to the offense because that's the only way they feel they can survive in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Niger, in Nigeria. See? So this is what we're talking about. The deadly is deadly enough. The Mujahideen are far more deadlier in this regard. They're deadly enough to challenge any government. This is why they were called terrorists at one time, because of their threat. The Futafula Mujahideen are coming from everywhere. And when they came, the Messina group talked about that, where the leader of the Messina group said he had fighters coming all the way from the west to the ocean to the east. Fulani Mujahideen. And he came to answer the call of jihad. See, so they are armed to the teeth. They have been funded. And they believe that the answer to the problem with the full of people and the non-full of people is creating a new Futafula Sultanate. We know this. We heard them say this. They've talked about this. It's been bandied about in talk shows too, that they want this Sultanate. But again, brothers and sisters, when these pundits get on TV, like in Nigeria or in Ghana or in other places like this, they again lump even the militias who are protecting their homeland only as one group, that they want a sultanate, when they said they don't want that. So I broke it down to you. All three groups are full of herdsmen. That's a mistake there, excuse me. Now, the bandits are not Mujahideen. We must get that clear. You won't hear me call them Mujahideen because they're not. Because they're not fighting fi sabilillah. They're not fighting. They're fighting for financial gain only. And their kidnapping and everything is not approved under the Quranic law. We know that. And at this time now, they're even killing other Fulani kinfolk. As you know, if you've been reading reports, we have many, and I will touch on some of this in a later segment, another time, inshallah ta'ala, bi'ithnillah, about how our Fulani brothers who are quote unquote bandits are kidnapping prominent Fulani people to get ransom. And then when they don't get it, they kill them. We have that happening now. This is why we have to figure out something, how we can bring the bandits to the table. We had this remedy. We brought Sheikh Gumi, took it upon himself with some other prominent scholars of Islam and imams to go among the bandits, and he stopped some of them, but the government stopped him. So they took this avenue away, as you hear me again talking for weeks. The Fulani intellectuals and other scholars should be involved to mediate any of these things that are going on in the Sahel, but they're limited. They won't let them in this regard. See, so their attacks again are financial goals, kidnapping even other Fulani folk, as I said here. That is a tragic situation. That goes to show you that they don't care nothing about religion or any kinfolk. If you have money, if you're full, they can kidnap you and your family. They don't care, and if they know that you got money, they'll man that. If they don't get it, they will kill me or any other Fulani person. This is why, if anyone is be classified as a quote unquote terrorist, unfortunately, this third group, the bandits, is close to that, because what they're doing is marauding, and they are muharaba according to Islamic law. They're muharaba. Now, you heard me talk many times about the Prophet when he designated these people as muharaba. They were given no quarter. When they were caught, they were executed. See, so our Fulani bandits, they're wayward young men. And they're getting to the point now where they're muharaba now, according to Islamic law. But we know none of the Sahel states and nobody hardly in Africa is practicing Islamic law. We know that, and that's another story altogether. The Christians' reprisal raids. We again, brothers and sisters, we know the Christians and the animists like the Ifa and other traditional African religion groups. They have attacked the Futafula community in reprisal raids, so it's going back and forth. We know that, and most likely side with Boko Haram. Now, this is something. The bandits are closer in relationship to Boko Haram per se than they are to the Mujahideen groups. The bandits have a relationship with Boko Haram because Boko Haram and the quote-unquote full of bandits are both mainly doing the same thing: kidnapping for ransom, waylaying, and random wanton murder. Okay, they're both, so they have a connection, so they are close to that. The bandits are not close to Mujahideen groups per se, even though they have worked together in certain circumstances, but generally speaking, they're not. Their aim isn't offensive or defensive jihad, nor advocating a new Fula sultanate. Our bandits are not caring about that. They're not caring about an emirate. They're not caring about all of the Futafula community through the Sahel and their health and creating an emirate. They don't care about that. They care about their group getting money and financial means to put in their pocket so they have a livelihood. This is their aim. So you have the militias who are not asking for an emirate or a sultanate. They are protecting their own communities. The bandits say, we don't care about that. All we want is what was taken from us. We had 8 million taken from us, cattle, land, and so on and so on. We're getting it back through means of kidnapping for ransom and from reprisal raids and so forth like this through the Sahel. This is what they say. See, so they're not advocating, they're not Mujahideen, because why? They're not asking for a Islamic state, a Dola Quran, Dola Jihad, or Dola Iman. This is the terms in Arabic under the Sharia that we call the states like our forefathers ran. They call it jihad state, jihad sensei. I mean, there are many names we had for many of our Fulani emirates and sultanates. Beautiful, beautiful sultanates we had running, especially from the 1300s to the 1800s. Beautiful sultanates and emirates, brothers and sisters. You heard me talk about that many times. And the names that our brothers had were something else. I love the names. Hamidi, Sawadi. Well, I mean, our brothers really had some beautiful names. Beautiful names. And those brothers ran the Sharia of law, and they were successful. The Futafula bandits generally lack, this is the key, brothers and sisters. Our bandits are not, generally speaking, are not educated. They're not worldly educated, nor are they educated Islamically. So that makes them vulnerable, since they are not running by the Islamic mode. They're not educated as far as the world, so they're more susceptible to the whispers of Shaitan. Subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this in a few places in the Quran, talk about the footsteps of the Shaitan, of the devil. Our young brothers, unfortunately, are closer akin to the footsteps of Shaitan than are to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sunnah of Allah. They're not close to that. They transcending all reason, no religion. In most cases are ragtag groups. We know many of the bandit groups are ragtag. You have 30 here, 20 here, 15 here, 6 here, 7 here. But they did get together many last week to hit all of these particular places and villages to kill upwards of 200 people. This wasn't 5 of them that did this. They got all the bandit groups got together, from what I understood, and they coordinated attack, and they begin to attack these areas. But generally speaking, these are ragtag groups, 10 here, 20 here, 30 here. Some may have 50. See, so this is what we know of the bandits today. However, recently they coordinated, as you heard me say right here, full of bandit groups to raid and slaughter. That's unfortunate, but they did do 200. And again, we cannot sanction murder, even if we have reprisals. I understand that. And again, it's easy for you or me to say that we're sitting here, we didn't have our wife and our daughters and our sons and our grandparents and our parents slaughtered, especially slaughtered viciously. See, so I don't know how most of us would react. And it's not fair for us to sit there and say, well, I wouldn't react this way. You don't know that until after it happens to you. Things happen to you, the devil gets your anger, you forget your iman, and then you go to make reprisals. We have that, and it's happened. They killed these Christian 200 here lately, which was about a week ago. Again, these are reprisal hits. The African and non-African, non-Christian media and Western powers over-glorified this as an unprovoked incident. Brothers and sisters, this is what I was talking about. It is provoked, because as long as the ethnic groups begin to steal our cattle, take us from our homeland, have extrajudicial killings, killing 75 of us here, like they did at that one trade station. They went and mowed down all of the Fulani persons. Okay? They knew you're Fulani, boom, they shot and killed you. They didn't care if you was a woman, a child, 5 years old, they didn't care. If you Fulani, they murdered you. They murdered 75. I think that was about a year ago. In 2023, I think that's when this happened. I think a train station on the train. I can't recall now all the particulars. But these are reprisals for what has happened to them. And the Fulani bandits are mainly young, uneducated men. They have no way of life. They have no way of life. And we're not justifying what they're doing. As you heard me talk, they don't have the Islamic education. They don't have the worldly education. Let me see here what some of our brothers have been saying here. Okay, we got the same brother here. He's saying here, what part of the problem is it linked to the government? Seems you trust the government and the sheikh or priests who work with them, all corrupted and not excluded. No, I didn't say I trust the government. That's not the case. at all, because any of the governments who run non-Sharia, they're problematic. And you know, we have scholars talking about this issue. We had one famous scholar of Islam, who's well noted, last year gave about a 10-15 minute speech. Oh boy, excuse me, brothers and sisters, they're coming out and come after my my thing. Excuse me for a minute. Okay. Um, the I don't put trust in them because many of them are working and under the thumb of the Americans. And you see how I'm talking about what has happened to our community, and our governments are behind it and supporting it. See, so I'm not supporting them at all. I'm giving you all the synopsis on why we're doing what we're doing, and that's why I talk about these issues like this. It's not that I'm in support of the governments or anything like this, but as a Muslim, we have rules and we must listen and obey. Even if we disagree with some of the things, we are bounded to listen. And as you heard me talk about, and maybe some other classes, especially when you talk about offensive jihad, we need authorization for that. And I'm not silly enough to to say something to coordinate some people to make them do something when I know better than that. And I've told people never do anything unless you have some paperwork behind it. And that's our rules as Muslims. Okay, I'm getting ready to close here pretty soon, brothers and sisters here. Okay, yeah, where we here. Okay, Christians are okay. Now, the media outlets conveniently left off the previous Christian and animist slaughter of Futafula kinfolk. We know this, we see this many times. That's why you hear me talk about it now, or fail to mention the fact that the Fulani bandits are marauding to reclaim what was stolen from them. They don't talk about that issue. They make it sound like our young men just woke up one morning and just decided to go kill somebody. That's not the case at all. We know what they're doing is wrong, but there's a reason why they're doing. And when you do things to people, there's a reaction. Like in the United States or any other place, the Tubab has been very vicious in their handling of black folk for 400 years. Black folk began to do things back to them, and they were vicious in their retaliation, weren't they? Huh? And even in slavery time, when the brothers had enough, their reprisals were very vicious, right? They hacked to death the Tubab and his families. See, this is human nature. When people are under the thumb and they've been abused for so long, when they do strike out, they do this. And you know, and this is a human trait. They strike out at this person, they may become more vicious, or their act and their reprisal may be more vicious than some of the acts that were perpetrated against them. This is human nature. So again, the farmers are the three African states where we have the big conflict of the herders and the farmers, mainly Nigeria, Ghana, and Togo. We have some others, like maybe in some other parts in the coastal West Africa, but generally speaking, we don't have many of these types of, like in Mauritania and Mali. This is not basically grazing lands because of the terrain. And for fighting to control the government and its resources and infrastructure while providing protection, security for Fulani herdsmen and their kinfolk. Again, Mujahideen looks at it from a standpoint that they say, okay, you know, let me go back to that. The problem that we have, again, is we're not being protected. Look what's happened in Ghana. You heard my program where we had the security forces go after to kill our kinfolk in northern Ghana. And they went there and some of them were killed instead. The Fulani herdsmen were waiting on them because they know they're them because they've been having attacks on their communities. So they had guns and other weapons. So when the security forces showed up, they were waiting on them. And when the bullets began to fire, some of the policemen, my understanding, was shot and killed between the fight between the security forces and the Fulani there in northern Ghana. See, so we have this. So the remaining states in the Sahel encompasses ethnic strife. The difference between what's going on in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger is not about grazing lands. This is ethnic. Okay, this is for control of vital resources. This is what this is about. In the other three states I aforementioned here, it's about the grazing land, water rights, and whatnot. So we have a difference. Why we have Fulani people striking at different groups. See, because in those other three states, it's about the farmers. And the rest of the other Sahel states and Western states, it's about ethnic strife. The people the doggone don't like the Fulani because the Fulani have been masters over them for 200 years or 300 years. So they're in reprisal mode. And when they get armed, they go to attack and kill Fulani in revenge for what has happened under the Messina Sultanates 200 years ago. See, this is what we're talking about in that situation. Fighting for control of the government and its resources. The ethnic strife is that. Look what's happened in Niger. The Afro-Arabs took over the government, didn't they? But the main security apparatus was still under the House of People. You had some security apparatus under the Tuareg and Afro-Arabs themselves. But generally, the stock who's controlling the security forces were Hausa. Look what has happened. He was overthrown. See? And a Hausa brother took over, as you know. So this is what, again, while we talk about this, we have who is going to control the infrastructure. Is it going to be the Tuareg? It's going to be the Arabs? Is it going to be the Fulani? Or is it going to be the Hausa? This is what you got the problem in Niger. But in Mali, it's dealing with the Arabs, the Tuareg, and the Fulani. Burkina Faso, the same thing. See? So this is those dynamics, brothers and sisters. Conducive to wide stretches of land for grazing and farming, the conflicts are more of an ethnic nature, as you heard me say, in those other states. Settling old scores of generation past, you heard me talk about this issue again about the Fulani people, because we've had so many sultanates and emirates. We have been controlling places, and then we've been controlled. We had people take over our empires, our sultanates, and then we had offensive jihad to take back what we lost. So this has been going on since about the 1300s. There's nothing new. But one of the elements that we have to talk about now in this day and time is that they settled the old scores of generations past, because it was passed down about how their grandpappies were under the control of the Fulani emirates and sultanates. Jealousy and envy of the Fulani and their mystique and their wealth makes them targets of other ethnic groups. Other ethnic groups, when you talk about, you hear them talking about the Fulani, you smell the jealousy coming from them. You smell the envy of them too. And you heard me talk here weeks back about the thing what happened in Ghana, the commissioner, I forgot what they called him, what he said, are the Fulanis better than us? If you listen to what he said and how he said it, you can feel this jealousy and envy. He said, are the Fulani better than us? See? So this is what we talk about here, because we have many groups very envious of us. Without the implementation of Sharia law, these problems here in Nigeria, in Togo, in Ghana, in coastal West Africa, in the Sahel, in the Savannah regions will continue, because the democratic ways and means will keep fueling this. The revisiting of our ancestral and sultan and should be sultanate and emirate leaders, sultan and emirate leaders. We should go back. Our leaders in the Sahel region should go back to see how it was done in the 1500s or the 1600s, 1700s, because we have literature. We know who was doing what. We have problems similar to what we have today. How did they handle it? How did Usman Den Fodio handle this? How did Omar Dal handle this? How did Modibo Adama, how did he handle some situation between the farmers and the herdsmen? We should look at how they handled that. How did a non-Fulani person, non-Muslim, Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, how did he handle the problem? As you heard me talk about weeks ago about how he handled this problem. He took it from the Messina, how the Messina had their rules and regulations. They called code of regulations. That was between the farmers and the herders. Beautiful regulations. Kwame Nkrumah adopted that. And he was working until he was busted. Until, of course, you know what happened to him. I don't have to get into that. But that code of regulations benefited the herders and the farmers. We don't have that today. So maybe our leaders should go back to look at the former, sultans and emirs and see how they handle situations like, but they won't do it. Because when they get troubled, what do? They run to the Tuba. And they run to a kafir on top of that, a disbeliever, to ask him about a problem between two Muslims. See, and that's why we're going to continue to have this problem in the Sahel, because they will not go back to the past and look how the former sultans and the emirs handled these situations. It will not. They refuse to do that. And as I said, brothers and sisters, this problem will continue unabated. It will continue unabated. Unfortunately, I hate to say that, but as long as we don't have Sharia law, we're going to have this problem. We're going to continue to pick up the newspaper or look on TV or YouTube. We'll find that the TIF just killed 30 Fulani. The Yoruba just killed 4 Fulani students driving in a car. The security forces found Fulani sitting there near a waterway and went and slaughtered them. We'll hear the Fulani, in reprisal of what happened to their kinfolk, go and kill 50 Christians in one area. This is going to continue until we go back to the Sharia law. Okay. I'll entertain some more of these questions. How you doing, my brother? Assalamu alaikum. It's nothing new, the facts. You need deep dive into history. I've given, you have to look at some of my other tapes. I've given a lot of history about things going from the 700s up to the present. And the facts that I'm giving, we're talking about, like, how many of us understand when they talk about the militias? Because many people don't understand what they talk about militias, especially in the West, like in the Caribbean and in Americas. They don't understand. They may be Fulani, but they don't understand what makes the difference between these groups. So I go over that to give them the education. I have got, you look at some of the tapes, I've went back, I've given you the sultanates, I've given you the names of the sultans. I give you what happened in the 700s when the Fulani people went from the Futafula the communities of what we call Mauritania today, and formed into groups, and they led a way up into what Andalus. I covered that extensively. If you look at my tape, I talked about the history. I talked about how the Fulani controlled West Africa for long periods of time. I gave you the name of the sultanates that happened, especially from the 1300s to the 1800s. But today, I'm not covering all that because I've already covered that. Today, I'm talking about the differences between the Futafula Mujahideen, the Futafula bandits, and the Futafula militias. There's differences. That's what I'm covering, because the media doesn't cover that. They only lump all of us, me, you, everybody who's Fulani, as one. And usually they say we're ISIS, which is not true. You have given one of the most educated commentaries on these events. Thank you, my dear brother. I have been listening to you from America for a while. Thank you, my dear brother. Yes, I tried to give a deep analysis as much as I can to break it down so we can understand. Like today, I want you to understand the Mujahideen, our Futafula Mujahideen, why they're doing what they're doing, and why the bandits are doing what they're doing. We have to explain that because they're still our brothers. They're Africans. We have to explain, yes, they're wayward, but we have to explain why they're doing what they're doing. See, we have to do that. And so that's why I try to do it. I have been listening to you. You said you've been listening to me. Thank you. I really immensely appreciate that greatly, my dear brother. Yeah, I'm here in Geechee. Many of us Geechee's folk have, a lot of full of folk in our lines. Yes, we have West Africa is a melting pot. I mean, hardly anybody today is pure Fulani. You can't say that. Many of us, you cannot say you're pure Mende. You cannot. Or Wolof, or Tiv, or Yoruba, or Igbo. You just cannot. We're all mixed up. If you look at my DNA, which I've talked about my DNA, you see Mandinka, you see Mende, Kempele, you see Omo people of Sudan. You see also the people of which I talked about before, who are now Mujahideen in Sudan. I got some of that heritage as well, because they're the Fulani who went over to the eastern part at Chad, Sudan, and Habasha, Ethiopia. So we're all mixed. And yes, and the tensions go back for years. This is true. This is what I was talking about. Yes, it's a blessing for you to speak so rationally about these things, because these, yes, it's been going on for a long time, and these killings and stuff has to be explained, because we're not understanding why people are killing like this. Nobody's justifying killing of nobody, but we have to explain why the Fulani people are killing. But we're being killed by other ethnic groups, Tiv, Yoruba, and Mali, the doggone people. They're killing the Fulani people as well. We know that, okay? And so we have to explain those issues, because we should have an understanding. And it's not easy many times for us to understand, especially in the West. A lot of us don't understand what's going on in Africa, because the rat race, I lived in America 50 years. I know how America is. And a lot of times you don't have time to understand or get caught up to speed on what's going on in Africa. You just don't, because you have to worry about your food. You got to worry about police brutality. You know what I mean? If you're going to get fired at your job, racism, you have a lot of things on your plate that you have to worry about there in the United States, as we both know. But I try to give it to you so you can understand. And thank you very much, my dear brother. Thank you very much. And, our brother here, he made a good point. And I don't want anybody to take slight to what he's saying, because he's not attacking anybody. He's not attacking me. He's got a point what he's saying. But again, it's not fair in this regard, because our dear brothers should look at my tapes and go and pick out those tapes where I do give history lessons, because I did give that. And I give some extensive, especially on the thing from the 700s about the Andalus, because the Fulani people are part of North African history, big time. If you look at the DNA of a lot of the people, especially in Maghreb, they've been Amazigh, because they're not Arabs, they're Amazigh. Most Amazigh people have Fulani heritage as well. I talked about that. I gave pictures, showed pictures. I showed the intermarriage connections between them and even the Tubab. I talked about that historical thing. I gave names of what happened when the Futafula Mujahideen soldiers in the 700s went into Andalus, as we know as Spain. They began to mix with the Tubab women of we know as Spain today, and they caused a new race of people called the Melungeons. I covered that. I covered about some of the beautiful sultanates. So I did give a history lesson, my dear brother. So you just gonna have to spend some time to look at those tapes and stuff like that. But I didn't want to get into that deep history today, because it's not for that. As you see my caption, we were talking about terrorism and how the Fulani people have been designated as terrorists, and I wanted that out, and so that way we can understand what's best for us and what is our aim. And we have to understand that, brothers and sisters, because we're all not all criminals and bandits and brigands and so forth and so on. And I wanted to cover those facts like that. So, brothers and sisters, I think I'm about ready to close here. I've been on long. I got to go pray. On top of that, I got to go pray. And I just wanted to cover sections there. And I appreciate all your questions, brothers and sisters, and those who showed up and those who will show up in the future. And it's important. I'm going to put because somebody asked for I will put down here where you can reach me if you want to write me, you can write me here if you have a question or you want something elaborated, or if you have a complaint or whatever, you can write me at my email address here, and you can send me a note if you want, and express something. If you have some topic that you want covered, or you want a topic that's understood, go ahead and write me. If you have a criticism, do it. I have no problems. Back it up with your facts, as long as you're respectful, because I'll be respectful towards you. I have no problems in answering those things. I've done that with some others who have wrote me, and they've had some topics that they wanted to address, and some things they did not quite understand. I had a brother that say, again, I talked about this many times about the Sudan. He was very mesmerized because he didn't know that the Futafula people are actually there, because he never heard the names called. And I gave him how the Fulani people, again, this is a history. I gave how the Fulani people entered into the Sudan region. They're no longer called Fulani, they're called Faleta and Falata. See, this is again history that I did go in. If you caught my other tapes, how they ended up in Sudan, how did they become the RSF in Sudan? And I wanted to cover that again at another time, because that is a very critical situation. And I talked about, again, this is history. These are the Umar people. I have heritage with them. They're Fulani, but they're, again, these people here, if you look at a map, they are, again, Fulani people, and they're Mujahideen. They're not bandits, and they're not brigands. They're not militia. These are Mujahideen who want to create a Islamic state. And now they're fighting in Sudan, as I told you about now. And the Hummer people are Fulani people. That's what they call them. And they got two branches. One they call the Faleta Hummer people. Faleta means Fulani in the language, the Sudani Fulfulde language. This is what they call the Fulani people. Again, this is history. This is what they call the Fulani people in the region of Chad and Sudan, and in Ethiopia. I don't have I thought I had a map here that was in English, but you see the map here. This is an Arabic, unfortunately. Over to your right here, you see almost near the ocean, you see Sudan. This is where we're talking about the Fulani people. These are the Fulani Mujahideen are everywhere in this region. As I talked about before, they're not bandits. These guys are Mujahideen fighting for the cause of Allah and to create a Islamic state. They're not bandits. It's a big difference. Again, you have to understand the historical thing behind them. These people also related to the Hama people, which are in the Congo region. They're Fulani, but they don't call themselves Fulani anymore. I also have this heritage, because this is all on my mother's side. All of the groups that my mother related to, they all are herders of some sort. It's funny, but all of them were herders of either camel or something, or cattle. And the Hummer people are herders of cattle and the camels. See, again, historical. I talked about that, and I talked about these are the RSF fighters. Again, these are Mujahideen. They are part Fulani. If you heard my class, I gave you history. How did they become Fulani Arabs? Essentially, how did they become that? How did Sudan come with this language? They have a Sudani Fulfulde dialect, which is mixed with a Fulani dialect with Arabic. See, I covered that as well, my dear brother, and I hope you pull up that tape or get a hold of me, and I can give you which ones you should watch if you need to find out more about this history. But this is important because this is Sudan, because the RSF are fighting the government forces, and again, trying to create a new Sudan state, which would be under Islamic banner. And again, our Futafula brothers are these brothers here who are mixed with what they call the Arabs of Sudan. See, so again, I gave the history about that, and this is something. And I'll get ready to close one more thing here. I've been talking about our brothers. This is the Mujahideen group again who are fighting, and you know, and this is a famous sheikh here of one of the groups of the this fighting with the Messina group. And again, he's not a bandit, he's Mujahideen. So again, I give you the differences in the Fulani people. Who are the bandits? Who are the Mujahideen? And who are the militias? And last week I gave a class talking about one of our brothers who was a militia. And he said in his comments that he was not Mujahideen. He's not a bandit either. He just wanted to protect his community because they had stolen their wealth. And that's all they care about, is protecting their homeland that they have, not to go out and fight against other ethnic groups just because. All they want to do is graze, raise their families, and live a peaceful life according to Polaco, you know, the way of life. And this is how they were looking at it. So, brothers and sisters, I hope I gave you a good synopsis on what's the Futafula community and how we are dissected and what has happened today and the groups that have formed. And now our brother asked a good question here. I gave him a little bit of history, and I'm hoping that he'll follow some of the other tapes and that he can look at those tapes and then he can see what I was talking about as far as history. And I gave you, again, brothers and sisters, the terror designations, what happened, say, almost 10 years ago, before, when they did lump all of us, militias, every Fulani person, as a terrorist group at that time. And then they finally got it right in 2022. They stopped to list us as terror groups, and I talked about that earlier. And now we have these, you know, you see the IS is there. We all know what's going on in Boko Haram, and then we got these other groups too there. But you don't see the Fulani Herdsmen anymore, which is good, because we were never a terrorist group, because we are a reprisal orientated group that had our lands taken from us and our wealth taken from us, and some of us became Mujahideen, others became bandits, and that's the way it's happened in our community. So I'll leave you with that, brothers and sisters, and those who showed up today. I really appreciate that, and I'm hoping that you guys stay safe there inside, you know, where you're living. If you're in Nigeria, I hope Subhanahu wa Ta'ala blesses you and keep you guys safe. Please be careful about what you're doing there, especially in Nigeria, with all the stuff in northern Nigeria, what's going on now. Please be careful. But be careful also in Burkina Faso and Mali and Niger, because it's still hot. Be very careful. And those living in America, you got a whole set of different problems that we don't have necessarily here in Africa. You got to be very careful there. And I'm hoping Subhanahu wa Ta'ala bless your families and keep you safe until you guys can make it back. If you're going to make it back to Africa, if you're born there like I was, you know, that's a different issue. But just keep in mind, keep praying to Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. We're hoping that Subhanahu wa Ta'ala will bless you and your families and keep all of us safe, regardless of you Fulani or not. We're all Africans and we're all brothers. And so, you know, I'm hoping Subhanahu wa Ta'ala blesses us and keeps us safe. And until the next time, brothers and sisters, I'll talk about another topic, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, anzurama.